I'm a 28-year-old guy, and this story starts with what was supposed to be one of the happiest days for my family, my dad's retirement party. He's 63, worked his entire life to provide for us, and finally decided to step back and enjoy some peace. My mom, who's 59 and loves organizing anything that gets her attention, immediately took over the planning. She promised a celebration that would make him feel as special as he deserved. Little did we know, it was about to become a day none of us would ever forget. To give some context, my family is tight-knit, though we've got our fair share of quirks. My dad is a classic introvert, quiet, observant, and happiest when he's tinkering in the garage or working on his garden. My mom, on the other hand, thrives in the spotlight. She's the kind of person who knows everyone's business and has no problem making hers public too. Then there are my siblings, my older sister, who's 31 and has always been the golden child. She's mom's favorite, though no one says it out loud. My younger brother, who's 24, is the family's designated troublemaker. He's the one who's always showing up late, stirring the pot, or testing everyone's patience. And then there's me, the middle child. I try to keep the peace, which often feels like a full-time job. When Dad announced his retirement, we were all thrilled. He'd worked as an engineer for decades, and honestly, he deserved to relax. Mom immediately started talking about the party. She wanted a big event, a rented banquet hall, catered food, music, and speeches. We all jumped in to help. My sister was in charge of decorations, my brother was supposed to handle music, though we had to remind him daily, and I got stuck with the emotional part, the toast that would wrap everything up. Mom was thrilled with the idea of us giving a tribute to Dad, and she was especially insistent that everything go perfectly. The weeks leading up to the party were hectic but exciting. We dug through old photo albums, laughing at our childhood pictures and reminiscing about the good old days. Dad mostly stayed out of the planning, happy to let Mom take the reins. But as the party got closer, I started noticing something off about her. She was unusually snappy, even for her, and kept disappearing to take phone calls. At first, I chalked it up to stress. After all, she was managing a big event. But my sister mentioned she'd caught Mom acting weird too. We didn't think much of it at the time. The guest list was massive. Friends, family, co-workers, Mom invited everyone. On the day of the party, the banquet hall looked incredible. My sister had gone all out with the decorations, string lights, framed photos of Dad's career milestones, and even a happy retirement banner that stretched across the room. Guests started pouring in, and the atmosphere was electric. Dad was in his element, laughing and chatting with his old buddies. It felt like a celebration of everything he'd worked for. But then I noticed an elderly couple sitting near the back. They were well-dressed but unfamiliar. I figured they were some distant relatives I didn't know, or maybe old friends of my parents. They kept mostly to themselves, though Mom seemed to glance their way more often than necessary. At one point, I saw her whispering with my sister while glancing toward the couple. It was strange, but again, I brushed it off. As the night went on, we moved to the speeches. My brother kicked things off with a hilarious roast of Dad, which had everyone laughing. My sister followed with a heartfelt tribute, talking about how much Dad had taught her over the years. When it was my turn, I delivered my part, thanking Dad for his sacrifices, his guidance, and his quiet strength. I tried to keep it together, but it got emotional, and I could see Dad tearing up. Then it was Mom's turn. She walked up to the microphone, and for the first time all night, she seemed nervous. Her voice trembled as she started thanking everyone for coming and praising Dad for his hard work. But then she paused and looked directly at the elderly couple. The room went quiet. Dad shifted in his seat, suddenly looking uneasy. Before anyone could figure out what was happening, Mom announced that she needed a moment and stepped away from the microphone. People started whispering, trying to figure out what was going on. My siblings and I huddled together, trying to make sense of it. My sister said Mom had been acting strange for weeks, but this was something else. We couldn't ask her then because she had disappeared into the hallway. When she came back, her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. She grabbed the microphone again, her hands shaking. She took a deep breath and said there was something important she needed to tell everyone. That's when I realized this night wasn't just about Dad's retirement anymore. Update 1. Mom stood there, gripping the microphone like it was the only thing keeping her steady. The room was dead silent, all eyes on her. She took another deep breath and said, "Before I continue, I need to explain something about myself that I've never shared with most of you. I wasn't raised by my biological parents. I was adopted." Gasps rippled through the room. You could hear people murmuring, their voices barely above whispers. My siblings and I exchanged wide-eyed glances. My sister leaned in closer, her face a mix of confusion and shock. My younger brother just muttered, "What the hell?" Mom wasn't finished. She gestured toward the elderly couple sitting in the back. "This is the couple who gave me life. They're my biological parents." The murmurs grew louder, people clearly trying to piece together what was happening. I turned to look at my dad, who was sitting frozen in his chair. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the tightness in his jaw. He hadn't known about this. That much was obvious. Mom went on, explaining how she'd spent years searching for her birth parents. She found them earlier this year and had been meeting with them in secret ever since. She said it had been emotional and overwhelming, but also one of the most meaningful experiences of her life. She looked at Dad and then back at us. I thought tonight was the perfect opportunity to introduce them to all of you, to finally bring my two families together. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Dad shifted in his seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. He stood up abruptly and started toward the microphone. It was clear he wanted to speak, but Mom waved him off. "Please," she said, "let me finish." Dad stopped in his tracks, but he didn't sit back down. He stood there, arms crossed, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom continued, her voice cracking slightly. She admitted she hadn't told anyone about her plan because she didn't know how to bring it up. I wanted this to be a special moment, she said, her eyes darting toward the elderly couple again. I didn't mean to make it a surprise. At that, Dad let out a bitter laugh and walked out of the room without saying a word. The door swung shut behind him, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. That's when the whispers among the guests turned into full-blown conversations. People started speculating aloud, asking each other if they'd ever heard anything about Mom being adopted. A few guests, clearly feeling the awkwardness of the situation, quietly slipped out. The atmosphere went from celebratory to downright tense in a matter of minutes. My sister was the first to break our silence. Mom has every right to reconnect with her birth parents, she said, her voice defensive. This is her story. My younger brother, on the other hand, wasn't having it. Yeah, but why ruin Dad's retirement party for it? This was supposed to be about him. The two of them started bickering, and I stood there, caught in the middle. I didn't know who to agree with. I could see both sides. Mom, noticing the tension between us, came over. She looked tired and stressed, like the weight of the night was finally hitting her. She told us Dad had known about her search for her birth parents, but hadn't expected them to show up at the party. I thought he'd be okay with it, she said. I really thought this would be a good moment to share this part of my life. We didn't get much time to respond because the elderly couple, her biological parents, had walked up to the microphone. They addressed the room, apologizing for any disruption. They said they were just happy to finally meet their daughter's family and hoped everyone could understand the significance of this day for them. It was a heartfelt speech, but it didn't land well. By the time they finished, most of the guests were either too awkward to stay or simply wanted to avoid getting dragged into the family drama. The room was starting to clear out. Dad returned shortly after, his face still tense. He walked straight to Mom and demanded to know why she hadn't told him her parents would be there. You've made this night about you, he said, his voice low but firm. Mom tried to explain, but Dad wasn't having it. He accused her of turning what should have been his moment into something entirely different. The argument quickly escalated. Mom defended herself, saying she didn't think it would overshadow the party. Dad countered by pointing out that she had kept secrets, not just from him, but from all of us. It got heated fast. My sister stepped in, trying to calm things down, but my younger brother jumped in too, saying Mom had no right to hijack the night. The back and forth felt endless. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the middle again, trying to figure out how to defuse the situation. The elderly couple eventually left, apologizing again as they walked out. Mom stood there, watching them leave, tears in her eyes. Dad stormed off toward the back of the room, clearly needing space. And the rest of us? We just stood there, surrounded by empty tables and discarded plates, wondering what the hell had just happened. Update 2. As soon as the elderly couple left the room, the tension only got worse. My older sister tried to calm things down, telling Mom and Dad that this wasn't the time or place for an argument. But it was like neither of them could hear her. Mom stayed near the microphone, her arms crossed tightly, while Dad paced near the back of the room. My younger brother, clearly still fuming, muttered something under his breath about how Mom had ruined everything. Meanwhile, the few guests who hadn't already left were starting to make their exits. You could see the uncomfortable looks on their faces as they awkwardly thanked us for inviting them and slipped out, trying not to draw attention. Within minutes, the banquet hall was nearly empty, apart from our immediate family. That's when Dad finally stopped pacing and turned to face us. His voice was calm, but the words hit hard. I told her from the beginning I didn't think finding her birth parents was a good idea, he said. I was worried this exact thing would happen. It's not just about her, it's about all of us. Mom immediately fired back, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. She accused Dad of never supporting her, of always trying to control what she could and couldn't do. She said reconnecting with her birth parents was something she needed to do for herself, and she wasn't going to apologize for it. The argument kept escalating, with both of them talking over each other. That's when I stepped in, trying to remind them why we were all here. This is supposed to be about Dad's retirement, I said. Can we just focus on that and deal with everything else later? It worked for about 5 seconds before my sister chimed in, dropping a bombshell of her own. I've known about Mom's birth parents for months, she said. She told me not to tell anyone. That caught everyone off guard. My brother immediately turned on her, his voice rising. You knew? And you didn't say anything? You've been lying to us too? My sister tried to defend herself, saying it wasn't her place to share Mom's secret. But my brother wasn't having it. He accused her and Mom of betraying Dad, of keeping him in the dark about something that should have involved the whole family. Things were spiraling fast. The elderly couple, who hadn't left yet, tried to step in. They approached Mom and Dad, apologizing again for the timing and saying they never wanted to cause any trouble. They offered to leave, but Mom insisted they stay. It was clear she wanted their support. Then, out of nowhere, Dad dropped another bombshell. He looked straight at Mom and said, "You've kept secrets too, you know." The room went silent. Mom froze, her expression quickly shifting from anger to something closer to panic. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but there was something in her voice that made it clear she wasn't as clueless as she pretended to be. Dad didn't elaborate right away. Instead, he just stared at her, like he was daring her to come clean. My sister-brother and I exchanged looks, all of us realizing at the same time that this was bigger than we thought. Finally, Mom said, "Can we please talk about this later? This is not the time." She looked around the room, clearly hoping to end the conversation before it went any further. But Dad wasn't backing down. "Why not now?" he said. "The whole family's here. Let's get everything out in the open." At that point, it was obvious this wasn't going to be resolved anytime soon. The last few guests slipped out quietly, leaving just the 5 of us and the elderly couple. The air was heavy, like we were all waiting for something to explode. As the silence stretched, I started thinking back to little things from my childhood. Random moments that didn't seem important at the time started clicking into place. Times when mom and dad had fought about something vague, moments when mom seemed overly secretive about her past. It felt like there was a puzzle we were all just now starting to piece together. Then dad broke the silence with one final line. "If you won't say it, I will." And just like that, the night that had started as a celebration was now something entirely different. We all stood there, waiting for whatever was about to come next. Update 3. Dad stood there, arms crossed, taking a deep breath like he was bracing himself for the impact of his own words. Then he dropped the bombshell. "I've known for years that you were adopted, but there's more. Your biological father isn't who you think he is." The room erupted. My sister gasped loudly, my brother froze mid-step, and mom's face turned pale. She stammered, barely able to get the words out, saying dad must be mistaken. The elderly couple, still seated near the edge of the room, exchanged confused and distressed looks. They clearly hadn't been expecting this either. Dad didn't stop there. He explained that shortly after he and mom got married, her adoptive mother had pulled him aside and confessed something she'd never told anyone else. According to her, mom's biological father wasn't the man her birth mother was married to at the time. It was a close family friend, her adoptive father's best friend. An affair had supposedly resulted in mom's birth, a secret buried for decades. The elderly couple looked visibly upset, shaking their heads in disbelief. They said they had hospital records and birth certificates proving that they were both her biological parents. They insisted there was no way what dad was saying could be true. But dad was adamant. He said mom's adoptive mother had told him this with tears in her eyes, swearing it was the truth. He admitted he'd kept it to himself all these years because he didn't want to hurt her. But now, with the sudden arrival of her birth parents and all the drama it had brought, he felt the truth needed to come out. That's when chaos really broke loose. My sister jumped in, defending mom. She said it was unfair for dad to bring this up now in front of everyone, and accused him of trying to sabotage what should have been a happy moment. My younger brother wasn't having it, though. He sided with dad, saying the truth needs to come out no matter how ugly it is. In the middle of all this, mom crumpled into a chair, her hands covering her face. She started sobbing, saying she didn't know what to believe anymore. "I thought I knew who I was," she cried. "Now I don't even know if that's true." The elderly couple stood up, trying to calm her down. They apologized again for the timing of everything and assured her that the story dad was telling couldn't be true. They looked heartbroken, like they couldn't believe this was happening. That's when dad suggested a DNA test. "It's the only way to settle this once and for all," he said. Mom immediately looked horrified. She begged him to let it go, saying the past didn't matter anymore. She insisted that knowing wouldn't change anything and would only cause more pain. But my younger brother wasn't about to back down. He said he agreed with dad, that we had a right to know the truth about our family's history. My sister, on the other hand, was furious. She accused dad of turning the night into a circus and said this wasn't the way to handle things. At this point, I tried to step in and mediate. I suggested that maybe we should all take a step back, cool off, and revisit this discussion later. But neither side was willing to budge. Dad was determined to get to the bottom of it, while mom was just as determined to keep the past buried. The elderly couple eventually decided they'd had enough. They told mom they loved her no matter what and apologized for unintentionally causing harm. With tears in their eyes, they left the room, leaving us to sort through the mess. That's when dad made his move. He demanded a family vote on whether or not to proceed with the DNA test. My younger brother was all in, saying he wanted the truth no matter what. My sister refused, saying it was cruel to force mom into something like that. Mom just sat there, silent, her face a mix of exhaustion and despair. Dad stood firm, saying he wouldn't move forward with his retirement plans until this was resolved. "How can I start the next chapter of my life?" he asked, when this chapter is still full of unanswered questions. That's when I noticed something. Mom and my sister exchanged a quick glance, a nervous one, like they both knew something they weren't saying. It wasn't much, just a flicker of eye contact, but it was enough to make me wonder if there was more to this story than any of us realized. The night ended with no resolution. We all left the banquet hall, tensions higher than ever. Dad's ultimatum hung over us like a dark cloud, and none of us knew what was coming next. But one thing was clear, the truth was out there, and it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. Update 4. The aftermath of the party was a mess. None of us spoke much on the ride home, and the weight of Dad's ultimatum hung in the air like a storm cloud. By the time we got back, it was clear this wasn't something that would blow over. Dad had made up his mind, the DNA test was happening, and he wasn't going to back down. We all agreed to regroup at our parents' house the following weekend to discuss everything. In the meantime, my sister, brother, and I had some private conversations about what had happened. I managed to get my sister alone and asked her about the glance she'd exchanged with mom. She denied knowing anything but was visibly evasive, like she was holding something back. I didn't push it, but the seed of doubt was planted. True to his word, Dad ordered a DNA test kit within days. He told mom that it was for her, him, and me, which surprised me. I hadn't expected to be included, but Dad insisted that we all deserved to know our full family history. Mom agreed reluctantly, saying she had nothing to hide, but her behavior told a different story. She was jittery and kept avoiding eye contact, like she was bracing herself for impact. The fractures in our family started to grow wider. My sister accused Dad of being manipulative, saying he was dragging everyone through unnecessary drama just to prove a point. My brother, on the other hand, fully supported Dad, arguing that we'd lived with enough lies and it was time for the truth to come out. I stayed neutral, not wanting to take sides, but privately, I couldn't help wondering if there was more to this than anyone was letting on. Dad announced that the test results would take a few weeks to process. In the meantime, the tension in the house was unbearable. Mom became increasingly withdrawn, spending most of her time in her room and barely talking to anyone. She stopped answering phone calls and even started skipping her usual errands. It was like she was trying to disappear. During one visit to their house, I stumbled upon her diary while looking for something in the living room. It was tucked under a stack of old books, the cover slightly frayed. For a moment, I debated opening it. Part of me felt like it might hold some answers, but in the end, I put it back without reading it. It didn't feel right to invade her privacy, no matter how curious I was. Dad, however, wasn't as patient. As the days passed, his frustration grew. One evening, he confronted Mom directly, demanding to know why she seemed so nervous about the DNA test if she truly had nothing to hide. Mom snapped, accusing him of being cruel and relentless, saying he was tearing the family apart over something that didn't even matter anymore. Then, the test results arrived. The tension as Dad opened the envelope was palpable. Mom sat stiffly on the couch, clutching the armrest, while my siblings and I hovered nearby, not knowing what to expect. When Dad finally looked at the results, his expression hardened. The DNA confirmed that Mom's biological father was not the man she had believed him to be. Instead, the match pointed to a close family friend of her adoptive parents, the exact scenario Dad had suspected all along. The room went silent as the weight of the revelation settled over us. Mom broke down completely. She admitted, through sobs, that she had suspected the truth for years but had never wanted to face it. She said she didn't know how to handle the possibility that her entire identity was based on a lie and had chosen to bury it instead of confronting it. The elderly couple was heartbroken when they heard the news. They apologized profusely for the confusion and pain, insisting they'd had no idea. They promised to stand by Mom no matter what and said they would always consider her their daughter, regardless of the biology. Dad, meanwhile, felt vindicated but didn't seem happy about it. He admitted that he regretted the way the truth had come out and wished there had been a less public way to handle things. Still, he stood by his decision to push for the DNA test, saying it was better to know the truth than to live in denial. The revelation tore the family apart in ways none of us could have predicted. My sister doubled down on blaming Dad, accusing him of prioritizing his need to be right over the family's well-being. My brother, on the other hand, supported Dad's stance and felt Mom was the one at fault for keeping so many secrets. I tried to stay neutral, but the divide between us was impossible to ignore. By the end of the week, it felt like our family had become unrecognizable. Mom was distant, Dad was exhausted, and my siblings and I were barely speaking. The truth was out, but it had come at a cost none of us had anticipated. Update 5. The weeks after the DNA results came back were some of the most strained in my family's history. Conversations were clipped, eye contact was avoided, and no one stayed in the same room for long. It felt like everyone was walking on eggshells, not wanting to set off another explosion. Family dinners became a thing of the past, replaced by awkward silences and separate meals. Mom was the first to break the ice. She approached Dad one evening and apologized, acknowledging that she had mishandled the entire situation. She admitted she'd kept secrets for too long, but she asked him to move forward for the sake of the family. She wanted to rebuild, though it was clear she didn't know where to start. Dad, to his credit, didn't shut her down. He agreed that they needed to work on their relationship but insisted they seek counseling. He told her trust couldn't just be patched up overnight, and they both needed help to understand how things had unraveled so badly. Meanwhile, the tension between my siblings grew worse. My sister doubled down on supporting Mom, saying Dad was being too harsh and inflexible. She believed he was dragging out the drama unnecessarily. My brother took the opposite stance, openly criticizing Mom for lying and accusing my sister of enabling her. They couldn't be in the same room without arguing, and I found myself constantly stepping in to keep the peace. Trying to mediate wasn't easy, but I couldn't just sit back and watch my family fall apart. I convinced everyone to attend a family therapy session, hoping it might give us a chance to air everything out in a neutral setting. Surprisingly, everyone agreed, though reluctantly. The first session was tense. Mom opened up about her struggles with identity, explaining how being adopted had always left her feeling like a part of her was missing. She admitted that reconnecting with her birth parents had been emotional and overwhelming, and she hadn't known how to involve the family without upsetting everyone. She said she regretted not being honest from the start but had been afraid of the fallout. Dad shared his side too, talking about how he'd felt betrayed and sidelined in the entire process. He revealed that he'd always been supportive of Mom's adoption search in theory but had serious reservations about how it might impact their family. He said the secrecy had made him feel like an outsider in his own marriage. The session took an unexpected turn when my sister made her own confession. She admitted she had known about Mom's doubts about her biological father for years but had kept quiet out of loyalty. This revelation hit my brother hard. He lashed out, saying he felt like he'd been lied to by everyone in the family. He accused both Mom and my sister of prioritizing their secrets over the truth, which only deepened the divide. The therapist stepped in and encouraged us to focus on what we had in common rather than what was tearing us apart. She reminded us that despite everything, we all cared about each other. It was a slow process, but by the end of the session, there was a glimmer of understanding. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Mom began rebuilding her relationship with her biological parents. The elderly couple reassured her that the DNA results didn't change how they felt about her. They told her they would always consider her their daughter, no matter what. Their unconditional support seemed to help Mom start healing, though it was clear she still had a long way to go. Dad, on the other hand, made a surprising decision. He announced he was delaying his retirement to focus on repairing the family dynamic. He said he couldn't move forward with this new chapter in his life until the rest of us were on solid ground. It was a big gesture, and while it didn't fix everything, it showed he was serious about making things right. Slowly but surely, the cracks in our family started to mend. We agreed to work on being more honest and transparent with each other moving forward. Therapy became a regular thing, and while it wasn't a miracle cure, it gave us a space to deal with our issues in a healthier way. For me, the whole ordeal was a whirlwind. Looking back, it felt like everything we thought we knew about our family had been turned upside down. The secrets, the arguments, the revelations, it was exhausting, but it also forced us to confront things we'd been avoiding for years. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still scars, and some relationships would take time to fully heal. But for the first time in weeks, there was hope. We were starting to move forward, not as the picture-perfect family we'd once tried to be, but as a real one, messy, complicated, and honest. As we sat around the dinner table one evening, laughing at one of my brother's dumb jokes, it struck me how far we'd come. It wasn't the same as before, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Sometimes, starting over is the only way to move forward.